I found a pregnancy test in the trash, but I had secretly had a vasectomy. The next day, I heard my wife tell her mother, "Of course I'll tell him it's his. My lover still doesn't want kids, and my husband has always dreamed of having one." I packed everything, left the house, and sent the test to her lover's wife. Her response left me speechless. I'm Oliver Miller, 34 years old, and until recently, I thought my life was in order. I've been married to Sarah for 7 years. We live in a quiet Denver neighborhood. I work as an engineer at a tech company, and she's a freelance graphic designer. Everything seemed fine, but a week ago, my world fell apart. 2 years ago, I made an important decision. I got a vasectomy in secret. I never wanted kids, though Sarah always talked about being a mother. Whenever the topic came up, I dodged it, but I knew I wouldn't change my mind. I went to a clinic, had it done, and didn't tell anyone. I thought it was for the best. After the surgery, I went for a follow-up, and the doctor confirmed everything was fine. 0 chance of pregnancy. A couple of months ago, I started suspecting Mark Thompson, a colleague of Sarah's. She worked with him on some projects and was always mentioning him. Mark said this. Mark helped with that. I met him at a work dinner, and he seemed too friendly with her. They laughed together, touched each other's arms while talking. I didn't like it, but Sarah insisted they were just friends. I tried to trust her, though something felt off. Last Tuesday, everything exploded. I was taking out the trash when I saw a small box among the garbage, a pregnancy test. I pulled it out and saw the result. Positive, 2 clear lines. My head spun. It was impossible for it to be mine. I stood in the garage, holding the test, feeling the ground shift beneath me. The only explanation was that Sarah was cheating, and Mark was the first name that came to mind. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces fit. I tucked the test in my pocket and went back inside. Sarah was on a video call, acting normal. I looked at her, searching for a sign, but saw nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the test hidden in my nightstand. I felt trapped, like my life was crumbling. The next day, things got worse. Sarah had plans to have lunch with her mother, Linda, who lives a few blocks away. I was home, working from my basement office, or at least pretending to. I couldn't focus. The test consumed my thoughts. I went to the kitchen for water and overheard Sarah. She'd come back and was on the phone in the living room, thinking I was still downstairs. The basement door was ajar, and her voice came through clearly. "I'll tell Oliver soon," she said coldly. "Of course I'll say it's his. My lover doesn't want kids yet, and Oliver has always dreamed of having one." I froze. It felt like I had been punched. My legs trembled, and I had to lean against the wall. Sarah had a lover and was planning to trick me into believing the baby was mine. Everything I thought about my marriage shattered. It had to be Mark. I wanted to storm into the living room and confront her, but I held back. If Sarah was capable of this, I needed to act calmly. That night, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled, talked, cooked dinner, though inside I was broken. I planned my exit. I couldn't stay with someone who betrayed me like this. The next morning, Sarah delivered the final blow. She came into the kitchen while I was making coffee, beaming. "Oliver, I think I'm pregnant," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I took a test yesterday, and it was positive. Isn't that amazing?" She hugged me, and I stood rigid, forcing a smile. I knew it was a lie. I knew she was trying to deceive me. I mumbled something like, "Wow, we need to talk about this," and excused myself to the bathroom. There, with the door locked, I clenched my fists until they hurt. I wasn't going to fall for her trap. That afternoon, while Sarah was on a virtual meeting, I went to bank. We had a joint account with about $80,000 in savings for a bigger house. I didn't hesitate. I transferred all the money to a new account in my name. I didn't feel bad. That money was as much mine as hers, and after her betrayal, I wasn't going to leave her anything. I went home and started packing, just the essentials, clothes, my laptop, some documents. I loaded everything into my car's trunk. I didn't know where I'd go, but I couldn't stay in that house another second. Before leaving, I did one last thing. I confirmed Mark was the lover. I checked Sarah's social media and saw her messages with him, always overly affectionate. I found his wife, Emily Thompson, on Instagram. Her email was in her profile. I put the pregnancy test in an envelope with a note that read, "Your husband and my wife have something to confess." I sent the package to her address that afternoon. I wanted her to know the truth. I got in my car and drove aimlessly. I had no plan, just a need to get away. For the first time in days, I felt a bit of relief. I'd lost my marriage, my home, my trust in the person I loved most. But I wasn't going to let Sarah and Mark get away with it. A few days later, while staying at a cheap motel on the outskirts, I got a message from Emily. Her response left me speechless. It was an email with the subject line, "We need to talk." My heart raced as I opened it with trembling hands. Emily wrote that she'd received the package, and the pregnancy test had left her in shock. She believed Mark was Sarah's lover because he'd been acting strange for 2 weeks. "He barely touches me, hardly talks, and is always on his phone," she wrote. When she asked what was wrong, he got defensive. "Now it all makes sense," she concluded. She wanted to meet in person and left her number, asking me to contact her. I didn't think twice. I texted her, and we agreed to meet the next day at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, far from where anyone might recognize us. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt Emily could be an ally. If she was as betrayed as I was, maybe we could do something together to make Sarah and Mark pay for what they'd done. That night, as I tried to sleep, my phone started ringing. It was Sarah. I didn't answer, but the messages kept coming. "Where are you, Oliver? What's going on? Why aren't you home?" Then one that made me grit my teeth. "Where's the money? I went to the bank, and the account is empty. Explain now." I turned off my phone. I had no intention of responding. Not after what I'd heard. Not after she tried to trick me with a baby that wasn't mine. Let her stew in her questions. She wasn't my problem anymore. The next day, I arrived at the cafe a bit early. It was a small place with wooden tables and the smell of freshly baked bread. I sat in a corner, ordered a black coffee, and waited. Emily arrived a few minutes later, a woman in her early 30s with brown hair and tired eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. She sat across from me, and after an awkward silence, she spoke. "Thanks for meeting me," she said quietly. "When I got that test, I didn't know what to think. But I think you're right. Mark's involved in this. I've suspected something was off for weeks, and now it all fits." I told her my side. The vasectomy, the pregnancy test, what I overheard Sarah saying to her mother. Emily listened without interrupting, gripping her coffee mug so tightly I thought it might break. When I finished, her eyes were full of tears, but her voice was firm. "Mark's always been selfish," she said, "but I never thought he'd go this far. He has a lover. He's expecting a child with her, and he thinks he can keep living like nothing's happened. I won't let him get away with it. And your wife, she's just as guilty. We agreed on one thing. Sarah and Mark didn't deserve to get away with this. We wanted everyone to know who they really were. It wasn't just about revenge. We wanted justice. Over the next 2 hours, we planned how to ruin their reputations. Emily knew Mark relied heavily on his professional image. He was a consultant at a big firm, and any scandal could cost him clients. Sarah, meanwhile, was a freelancer with a network of contacts who valued her perfect persona. If we exposed them, their world would collapse. We started with social media. Emily had access to Mark's email account, where we found messages between him and Sarah. They weren't explicit, but there was enough to raise suspicions. Affectionate comments, plans to meet in secret. I had photos Sarah sent to Mark, taken from her phone, before I left. We compiled everything and created anonymous social media accounts. We posted screenshots in local groups and forums where their colleagues and friends would see them with a simple message. "Sarah Miller and Mark Thompson have a secret. Ask them about the pregnancy test." We didn't stop there. Emily contacted some of Mark's clients, posing as an anonymous source, and sent them copies of the messages. I did the same with Sarah's contacts, ensuring her clients knew she wasn't the trustworthy person she seemed. We knew this could be cruel, but we didn't care. They betrayed us first. That night, My phone rang again. It was Sarah. I answered, curious to hear what she wanted. She was crying, screaming, "What did you do, Oliver? People are talking about me. My clients are canceling. Where's the money? You can't do this to me." I didn't say much, just, "You should have thought of that before you cheated." I hung up and blocked her number. I felt powerful but also empty. Exposing her didn't erase the pain. Emily and I stayed in touch. The post went viral in local circles. People were talking about Sarah and Mark, and their reputations were crumbling. Mark lost 2 major contracts, and Sarah was getting messages from friends demanding explanations. But not everything went as planned. One morning, I got an email from a lawyer. Sarah was suing me for the money I took from the joint account, claiming half was hers, and she had a right to it. It didn't surprise me, but it infuriated me. I thought I'd been careful. But clearly, Sarah wasn't going down without a fight. I talked to Emily that afternoon, and she said Mark was furious too. He'd tried talking to her, swearing it was all a misunderstanding, but she didn't believe him. She told me she was ready to keep pushing our plan, even if it meant more trouble. "I don't just want them to lose their jobs," she said. "I want everyone to know what they did. They can't hide." We decided to take it further. We found out about a local networking gala for professionals where Sarah and Mark would be. It was a place where they'd try to salvage their reputations. We planned to show up together, not to confront them directly, but to make it clear we knew everything. Emily suggested printing copies of their messages and leaving them on the event tables, like a bomb that would explode in front of everyone. It was risky, but I liked the idea. We wanted them to feel the same humiliation we did. While preparing, I got a bank notification. Sarah had won a preliminary hearing in the lawsuit. The judge ordered that half the money, $40,000, be returned to a supervised account until the case was resolved. It felt like theft, though I knew she legally had a right to it. But it didn't stop me. If Sarah wanted to fight for the money, fine. I'd keep fighting for my dignity. The night of the gala approached, and Emily and I were ready. We had the message copies, our tickets, and a plan to make Sarah and Mark never forget what they'd done. But something told me things wouldn't be so simple. There was a tension in the air, like everything could go wrong at any moment. The networking gala was about to start, and I felt a mix of nerves and adrenaline. Emily and I had planned everything carefully. We carried copies of the messages between Sarah and Mark, ready to leave them on the tables like a bomb that would ruin their reputations forever. We didn't want to confront them directly, just ensure everyone in the room knew who they really were. They'd played us, and now they'd pay. The venue was an elegant hall in downtown Denver, with dim lights, white tablecloths, and waiters offering wine. Emily and I arrived separately to avoid suspicion. She wore a simple black dress, and I wore a suit I hadn't used since my wedding. Ironic, I thought, as I moved through the crowd. I saw Sarah across the room, smiling and talking to a group as if nothing had happened. Mark was a few feet away, holding a glass, trying to look relaxed. Seeing them act like they hadn't destroyed our lives made my blood boil. Emily found me near the bar. "Ready?" she whispered, her eyes determined. I nodded. Our plan was simple. Leave the messages on the tables during the keynote speech when everyone was distracted. Each sheet had screenshots of Sarah and Mark's messages with the text. Ask them about their secret. We'd printed enough for everyone to see. The speech began, and the president of the local professionals association took the stage. People sat down and the lights dimmed. Emily and I moved quickly, placing the sheets on tables, tucking them under plates or among cutlery. No one noticed. All eyes were on the stage. When we finished, we returned to our spots, pretending nothing had happened. My heart was pounding so hard I thought someone might hear it. The speech ended, and people resumed their conversations. Then it started. A woman at a nearby table picked up a sheet and read it, her eyes widening. She whispered to the person next to her, and soon others noticed the papers. Murmurs spread through the room. I saw Sarah frown, looking around, and Mark stiffen as someone showed him a sheet. The tension was palpable. Suddenly, a loud voice broke the silence. It was an older man, one of the event organizers. "Excuse me," he said, holding a sheet. "Someone's distributed this, and I think we all deserve an explanation." He looked directly at Mark. Sarah froze, a hand over her mouth. The room erupted into chaos. People talking, some laughing, others staring at Sarah and Mark with disdain. Mark tried to speak, stammering about a misunderstanding, but no one bought it. Sarah stood and ran to the bathroom. I felt no pity for her. She tried to trick me with a baby that wasn't mine, and now she faced the consequences. Emily and I locked eyes across the room. We didn't smile, but we knew we'd won this battle. Sarah and Mark's reputations were destroyed. The rumors would spread, and their careers, so dependent on their image, wouldn't recover easily. But the night wasn't over. As I left the hall, someone touched my shoulder. It was Sarah, her eyes red, makeup streaked. "It was you, wasn't it?" she said, her voice trembling. "You put those papers out. How could you do this to me?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Do this to you? You cheated on me, Sarah. You and Mark. This is what you deserve." She tried to say more, but I turned and walked away. I had nothing left to say. The following days were a whirlwind. The social media posts Emily and I made kept circulating, and Sarah and Mark's story became the talk of Denver. Mark lost more clients, and Sarah could barely get new work. Emily told me Mark had moved to an apartment, and she was filing for divorce. I stayed at the motel, looking for a place to start over. The money from the joint account gave me some time, but I knew Sarah's lawsuit was still active. A month later, I got a court notice. Sarah had won the case for the money. The judge ruled that half of the $80,000, $40,000, belonged to her, and I was ordered to return it to a supervised account. It hurt, but it didn't surprise me. I knew she had a legal right. Still, I didn't regret taking it. It was my way of taking control, of not letting her get away with everything. Emily and I stayed in touch, becoming friends, bonded by pain and a determination not to be trampled. One afternoon, over coffee at the same place where we planned everything, she said something that made me think. "You know, Oliver, I don't know if I'll ever get over what Mark did, but exposing him gave me some peace. I feel like I reclaimed a part of myself." I nodded. I felt the same. Exposing Sarah and Mark didn't erase the pain, but it restored my dignity. I decided it was time to move on. I found a small apartment on the outskirts of Denver and started looking for new work projects. My boss, who knew a bit about what happened, offered me a promotion that would take me to an office in Seattle, a chance to start fresh. I took it without hesitation. Emily planned to move to Chicago, where she had family. Before we parted, we agreed to meet one last time. We met at a park as the sun set, the spring air cool. We talked about everything that had happened, how our lives had changed. "If you hadn't sent that test," Emily said, "I'd still be living a lie. Thank you, Oliver." I smiled. "And if you had responded, I'd be alone in this. Thank you." As we walked, Emily saw an article on her phone, a local post about Sarah and Mark. It said Sarah had lost her last major client, and Mark was looking for work out of town. No one took them seriously after the scandal. I didn't feel joy, but I felt satisfaction. They'd paid a fair price for what they did. Before saying goodbye, Emily and I made a pact. We wouldn't let the past define us. We promised to move forward, build new, better lives. We hugged, and for the first time in months, I felt I could breathe without a weight on my chest. I moved to Seattle a week later. The change was tough but necessary. My new apartment had a view of the sea, and work kept me busy. I still thought of Sarah sometimes, of the good times we had, but it didn't hurt as much. I'd learned an important lesson. You can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. And I responded by fighting. I don't know what happened to Sarah and Mark after that. I heard rumors that Sarah was living with her mother, and Mark had found a low-level job in another city. I didn't care. They were in the past.